So dudes, welcome back. Last week I did an interview with Mr. Pseychie about whaling in gacha games, and while most of you enjoyed it, or at least I hope that most of you did, there were some apparently who didn't, at least not as much, so I want to do a follow-up video here as a response to some of the more, let's just call them doubtful comments. Since my interview was the first time that a lot of Pseychie's viewers have heard of me, since in the gacha content creation space, I'm just a little guy, I feel like a lot of y'all didn't get a good idea of just how dedicated I am to gacha games. Admittedly, the interview itself, both Pseychie's version and my own uncut footage that I posted here on my channel, didn't do a good job of conveying that. Nothing against Mr. Pseychie here, I'm not saying this is his fault or anything, just that looking back on the interview, I think it would have set the context a little better if it gave you guys a better idea of just how atypical I am as far as gacha content creators go. So I want to start off this video by showing you guys at least a little bit why it is that I call myself the god of gacha. And I say a little bit because I already made a video demonstrating my degenerate gacha powers to a much better degree, 2 of them in fact, so I'd recommend watching those first if you're curious to know how far down the gacha rabbit hole I've gone. But for now, I'll give you guys the abridged version. I've been playing gacha games for the past 7.5 years, and I'm currently maining, yes, not just playing, maining a dozen different gachas, as in I grind dailies and events every day for all of them. They are in the order in which I picked them up: FGO, Azure Lane, Arknights, Genshin, Blue Archive, Nikke, Star Rail, Ether Gazer, Snowbreak, Wuwa, and GFL2. If I count the gachas that I played but eventually dropped, that number goes up to 15. Magia Record and Touhou Lost Word, both of which I played for around a month or 2 before dropping them, and then GFL1, which I played for 6 years before finally dropping it last year in favor of GFL2. I've also whaled quite a bit on all my gachas. As you saw from the thumbnail of Pseychie's interview, I've probably dropped over 100 grand across all my gachas over the years. Things are a bit different now, as I've explained in his interview though. Due to IRL circumstances, I've had to significantly cut back on my gacha spending, though I still buy the monthly and battle passes for most of my gachas if they offer them, and the occasional skin here and there. And lastly, I said earlier that I grind gachas, and I'm not exaggerating that either. All the gachas I've played for more than a month, my accounts in them should show how much work I put into them for those of you who are familiar with them. I even make videos of my account progress for a lot of my gacha games so that my viewers can see what I've done on them on a monthly basis. So in other words, I don't just spend a whole ton of money on gacha, I spend a whole lot of time actually playing them too. And by the way, for those of you who look at this and think, wow, what a fucking loser, who plays gacha games this much? First of all, I enjoy gacha. Dare I say, it's my passion. I mean, you'd hope that it is for someone like me, so kindly go f yourself. And second, I make content out of gacha games, and in a community where most content creators only play Hoyo games plus Wuwa, and have the audacity to call themselves gacha CCs, I don't know about you, but I feel like having more experience with various gachas, and not just the popular ones, puts you in a much better position to talk about them. And dare I say, I think I have a lot of it. At the very least, much more so than your average dog shit gacha tuber or streamer who knows jack shit about gacha in comparison, other than how to farm drama, clickbait, and or glaze their favorite ones. Matter of fact, I can take this 5 steps further. I can make the claim that I probably have more gacha experience than most of the Western gacha content creation community combined. There is a reason why I call myself the god of gacha, not the king of gacha, not even the lord of gacha like some baldy out there likes to call himself. No, I am the god of gacha, because the amount of investment that I put into my gachas in terms of both money and, more importantly, time and effort is beyond the comprehension of the vast majority of gacha players out there. Certainly beyond the comprehension of the comment section in Pseychie's interview video too, that's for sure. Oh, and in case 12 gachas wasn't enough for you, I still want to pick up even more. I made a video 2 months ago showcasing 5 more gachas that I want to add to my rotation. One of them, Magia Record Etc., is about to come out in less than 2 weeks at the time of this video recording, so pretty soon I'll be telling people that I main 13 gachas and counting. So now that you hopefully have a better idea of my background, let's get into some of these comments. The first one, just to ease ourselves into it, actually comes from my own interview footage, and they say, "You talk like there's this huge online army attacking people for spending money in games they like, but man, that's all it is. Like, hey, you like a game, you spend money on it, there's no stigma or anything, just have fun, spend your money how you like." Oh boy, I can tell this dude is not a Pseychie viewer because he clearly hasn't been in the other comment section. In a more ideal world, yes, that's how it should be. People should be able to spend money on the things they like or the hobbies they have without worrying about being judged for it. But the world we live in isn't that ideal now, is it? Right? There are in fact gacha players out there who will look at you funny if you tell them that you spend money in a gacha game. And if you don't believe me, just listen to some of the comments later that I'll be responding to in this video. And given how big gacha games have become over the years, actually your description of a quote-unquote huge online army isn't that inaccurate. And while yeah, it's not like there are people parading around hunting down anyone who spends money on gacha, like this is straight out of those Purge movies or whatever, you gotta be living under a rock if you think that there's no stigma around this. I remember telling the story to Pseychie, I just don't remember if it was during the interview itself or not because we chatted a little bit off camera, but back when I first started whaling on gacha with FGO, I remember people on the FGO subreddit back in the day talking shit about me when I uploaded my first whales log video on FGO to this channel, because they saw that and were like, oh wow, he wails on this game, what an idiot. And again, look at Pseychie's interviews comment section, some things never change now, do they? I've also watched plenty of streamers and VTubers play gacha or do sponsored gacha streams, and whenever they get to the gacha part where they roll for new characters, their chats immediately start saying stuff like, oh no, here it is, here's the gacha, time for the streamer to donate all their sponsor money back into the game. I mean, bro, there are some content creators out there who are known for being free to play. Like, that's the basis of their channels, and that's why a lot of their viewers watch their content in the first place, because of, like, I don't know, relatable streamer reasons, I guess. Not that there's anything wrong with that in a vacuum per se, and I'm not trying to blame those streamers in particular here for causing this stigma against dolphins or whales or just people in general who like spending money on gacha. It's not their fault, of course, unless they're also deliberately, promoting this whole free-to-play superiority mindset themselves, then in which case that's a different story. But to think that there's no stigma whatsoever is just blissful ignorance on your part, straight and simple. I've explained in a separate video of mine that there are a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, not saying it's good or bad, just pointing out what I've observed over the years, pride themselves upon being free to play in a gacha. Maybe it's because they feel like it's more difficult and challenging to play one without spending money, so them not spending money makes them feel like they're better players than those who do. Or maybe it's more the opposite, that they see people who spend money on gacha as having a huge advantage over those who don't, and so they just resent anyone who pays for gacha. Or it could be anything in between. By the way, just so that we're clear, I don't care if you're a free-to-play or a whale or something in between. Everyone plays gachas in their own ways, and everyone has their reasons for spending money on them or not. And unlike a lot of the comments in Pseychie's interview, I don't judge people for their decisions on spending money in a gacha game because I don't know enough about them and I probably never will. I'll only start to care if those people start flexing their status of being free to play or whale for dumb reasons, but I'll get into that later in the video. Whether it's a superiority complex or just being salty about how pay-to-win gacha games are, or any other reason on the spectrum, there are definitely people out there who will still uphold this stigma against dolphins and whales. Now, what I will say is that, generally speaking, it feels like I've been seeing less and less people openly on, whales for spending money on gacha, at least within the overall gacha community as a whole, though I'm sure if you go into some normal variety streamers chat or something and the topic of gacha comes up in their chat, you'll still probably find somebody who'll say something along the lines of, oh, I don't get why some people would spend so much money on them. I mean, hey, you don't even need to go that far. Just look at Pseychie's interview comment section, for God's sake. The fact of the matter is that so long as gacha games exist, this stigma against whaling in gacha games will also exist. Like, it's just one of those things where so long as human beings exist, there will always be little fucking pieces of shit that you just can't quite get rid of. So my hope is that over time, right, eventually this stigma will naturally fade to the point where most gacha players don't mind it when people spend money on gacha, to the point where people can freely spend money on gacha games without worrying much about getting ostracized by those who don't. It's just that, unfortunately, for now, for obvious reasons, I still think we have a long way to go to get there. The next comment reads, I think part of the stigma for whales is it leading to bad game design in order to incentivize more spending, or the game never improves because most of the money comes from whales paying for microtransactions. I point to EA Sports games and Ultimate Team where the quality of those games keep declining, but they never fix anything because the whales make up for any lost sales through the Ultimate Team gacha. This is an understandable reaction. I can certainly see how you came to the conclusion that, oh, devs can certainly be influenced to cater more to whales because they're the ones paying. I can actually give you a personal anecdote of my own. The first online game that I got heavily involved in was Combat Arms, the old Nexon free-to-play shooter game that some of you guys might recognize. Combat Arms fell victim to the exact same situation, with Nexon putting out more and more broken premium items and gear and guns that you had to pay for if you wanted them, and the quality of the game itself just spiraling downwards as we got more and more, paid, premium slop that made almost all the rest of the, the free-to-play gear severely underpowered in comparison. But this impression that people have that, oh, whales are the ones leading the developers to, bad game design is frankly inaccurate, because that's not usually how it works. It's actually the other way around. It's the developers who went down the path of bad, or at least pay-to-win game design first in order to make a quick buck. There will always be people who are willing to pay for stuff in an online game, especially if it gives them like gear or characters that are better than the rest, because they want to win. But they're not the ones making that gear or those characters, or, more importantly, making the decision to sell that sort of premium gear to the players in the first place. That would obviously be the developers. You can say the same thing about gacha games too. While most gachas are not pay to win, certainly not in the way that most people like to think of the term, there's no doubt that most premium gacha characters and gear are noticeably better than like whatever it is that they give you for free, usually anyway. Even still, it's the developer's responsibility here to keep stuff like, power creep and premium characters and gear under control, so that, they're not so much stronger than whatever it is that you get for free. And, design their games in such a way that whaling is still purely optional, and being a free-to-play is still completely viable. Again, it's not like it's the whales deciding to make their gacha games go full SAO memory defrag with all the PvP power creep. It's the devs doing that. So anyone who blames whales for ruining their gacha games should reconsider who they're blaming here. At the very least, remind yourself that the whales are the ones keeping your dumb fucking gacha game alive by paying for it so that your free-to-play ass doesn't have to. You want to know what happens to a gacha when all your whales leave? Just go look at the Magia Record EN server, or that one Konosuba gacha after it switched publishers, ironically, after Nexon sold it off to another company. In addition, the example that was used in the comment above was EA Sports, specifically FC Ultimate Team. I don't play it myself, but looking it up a little bit, apparently it's got PvP that I would assume people take pretty seriously. The difference between games like FC Ultimate Team and gacha games is that PvP aspect. If you have games with competitive PvP, or at least PvP that plays a big role in a game's overall experience, then yes, you very well may have a situation where devs are tempted to start shoving pay-to-win slop into them to farm the players for more revenue. Gacha games, on the other hand, are a bit different. I said this in Pseychie's interview, but I'll say it again anyway. Most gacha games are not pay to win, in case I wasn't clear enough with that earlier. To me, for a gacha to be considered truly pay to win, Either their main content, such as story or limited time events, must be so difficult to the point where you legit have no choice but to roll gacha just to do them. Note that I don't count endgame modes like Genshin Spiral Abyss or Wuwa's TOA as main content because they are totally optional side modes that don't influence the rest of your progress and the rest of the game whatsoever. So don't even bother coming at me with that shit. Or they gotta have some sort of like super intrusive PvP mode that dominates most of your time playing a gacha. A lot of gachas don't even have PvP to begin with, and for most of the ones who do, their PvP modes don't even matter and they're just kind of there for you to get a few more gems or buy stuff from like a separate shop or something like that, right? There are only a few where PvP is actually taken seriously. Right now, the only gachas that have this sort of serious PvP that I can think of are like the SAO Memory Defrag game. I don't even know if that game's still alive. Maybe Princess Connect and Epic 7. So I would say that for most gachas, developers aren't motivated to make pay-to-win stuff as much. I mean, they still can, but certainly nowhere near as much, simply because of the lack of PvP, or at least the lack of emphasis on PvP modes. Gacha devs are much more concerned with stuff like, keeping up a consistent content schedule, making new characters, and expanding their stories because that's what pays the bills for them. It's not to say that I think that gacha games are totally immune to bad design, while I'd refrain from saying that, Star Rail has full sent it down the path of power creep, like most people seem to be saying. I will say that we're still seeing shades of that happening nonetheless, just to use that game as an example. But I'd argue that bad design is mainly on the devs. They're the ones who make these games, and they're the ones who control how their games turn out. We, the players, just play them and work with what we've got, whether we spend money on them or not. So again, the fact that people seem to blame whales for ruining their games is absurd to me, and it's even more sad if they do it against gacha games, because the whole point of gachas is to roll for new characters. I guess you could argue that paywalling characters behind gacha, right, is in itself bad game design, and hey, I wouldn't disagree, but that's just kind of how gacha games are. And again, as long as gachas don't basically force you to roll gacha for their main content, honestly, that's fine by me. The next comment says, I don't think the fact that free-to-play players are free-to-play is what puts them on a pedestal. I think that beating content free-to-play style that typically requires paid items is pretty badass. It gives some cred to someone's gaming abilities as well as help prove that a game is free-to-play friendly. So I wouldn't mind someone using that as a flex, just like how we have Hyper Whales being #1 in every raid-style content and showing off on their YouTube channels. A free-to-play Beast account is a champion of the people, of the masses, that will not or cannot drop the same dough as a whale. I would argue it may even be more impressive sometimes and breed strategies that would not exist otherwise. If I were any less than the god of gacha, then yes, I'd be inclined to agree. Being free to play in an environment where you're encouraged or even pressured to spend money is in fact commendable. Or if we're talking about some of the older gacha games that I know, where pulling for premium characters was way more essential to your progress than it is in gacha these days, then yes, being free to play is more impressive. But having played all these gachas for so long, especially the newer ones, I've come to realize that playing gacha games as a free to play isn't quite as impressive as some of y'all seem to think. Because most gacha games, especially the ones I consider to be new age gacha, or in other words gachas that came after Genshin Impact, including Genshin, are super fucking easy. And before you start thinking to yourself, oh, well, yeah, you're a whale, so of course you wouldn't have any trouble with them. Keep in mind that I mentioned in the interview already that I've had to stop whaling for the most part in the last 2 years. So thus, I play all my gacha games these days as a very low spender, if not just a straight up free to play. Sure, still having stuff like the monthly and the battle passes for the games that I do still buy them in gives me an advantage over pure free to plays, but it's still a far cry from how much I used to spend and how I used to play, that's for sure. Anyways, you can clear all the main content in most gacha games perfectly fine as a free-to-play. There are some where it's a little harder to do that, sure, but once you put in the time and effort to figure out what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to play them, then you're pretty much good to go. And besides, if you're still having trouble, there are resources, guides, and spreadsheets online that other players in the community have made for you to use. You just gotta go find them. If you are the type of player to not use any of these resources and figure out, everything on your own as a free-to-play, then sure, I would actually consider that to be pretty impressive. But only for certain gachas. Like, for example, if you somehow figure out how to play something like FGO without looking up any external guides or assistance, then I'd be legitimately impressed, given that most people who play that game don't always know what they're doing. Like, I reviewed Pseychie's FGO review here on my channel recently, like a review of the review type thing, and some of his gameplay footage showed me that while he does actually know a bit more than your average FGO player, mechanics like target switching, there were still some things that he didn't know himself, like why you should almost never use your MP outside of the first position in your chain. But a lot of gacha players out there don't even play the older gachas. They just play the new popular ones like Genshin, Star Rail, Zenless, and Wuwa, or the Big Four as I like to call them for now. And figuring stuff out in those kinds of games isn't exactly rocket science. Like, in these games, the process is pretty simple, right? Play through story, do exploration stuff if there is any, and drag your balls through the broken, shattered glass minefield that is gear farming, so that one day, you might be able to fully clear endgame stuff. And honestly, it's not that much different for most other gacha games these days too. And yes, of course there are some things that on their own are impressive enough, right? Beating Spiral Abyss with heavily suboptimal gear and sometimes even characters, or that one dude who soloed Battle Tower and Zenless, I think all of it even, with Billy, are two good examples. By the way, I don't count Star Rail Zero Cycles because I think they're pretty stupid. But here's the thing. These guys are the exceptions. Like, these are the players who, if they were to put themselves on a pedestal, I wouldn't mind, because they can actually back up their ego. Much like how, when I call myself the god of gacha, I can show you exactly why. So when I was talking about this during the interview, I wasn't talking about those guys, like the solo Billy dude, or the people who actually come up with like the really cool free-to-play stuff in gacha games. No, I'm talking about every other motherfucker out there who's free-to-play and they talk shit about how they're free-to-play, right? The people who say free-to-play, by the way, unironically, and they haven't done anything that's worth ego farming about in the first place. They're not the ones who soloed Battle Tower with Billy. If anything, I'd guess that they're the idiots who probably talked shit on Billy in the first place for being a bottom tier free-to-play character that you start the game with. They're not the ones who meticulously test characters and work the numbers on them to figure out how good they are so that the rest of the community can decide whether or not they want to roll for them. They're not the ones coming up with the cool free-to-play strats and teams and setups that show you how to beat certain raids or events or other endgame modes, right, without top-tier characters. So why exactly should I be impressed by the average bottom-feeding parasite who just looks up everything they have to do in a gacha and then starts flexing about how amazing they are for being a free-to-play? And before you go on thinking that I'm being too harsh on the free-to-plays right now, just so you know, I treat my fellow whales the exact same way, or at least I hold them up to the same exact standard. Same exact standard? A similar standard, let's go with that. I've talked trash before on whales who do nothing but spend money to pull gacha, and that's literally all they do, right? Just pull new characters, don't even play the game. Right? I remember years ago in FGO, there was this one whale in like a Facebook group or something, like a Facebook FGO group, who'd spend a ton of money on, MP5 5-star servants and put them up on a support list right after. But he never bothered leveling up any of them. Like, they'd all just be like level 1 and shit. And he'd put them up just to flex them, just to show them off. And I roasted his ass hard for that. It's the reason why I tend to call whales like him Facebook whales. I've said this in a previous video too, but whales like this, who flex how much money they spend on gachas without even playing much of them, piss me off just as much too. Like, it's just that I see more free-to-play players who flex their free-to-play status than whales flex their, their whale status or whatever, since naturally there are a lot more free-to-plays than there are whales. Perhaps to the average gacha fan, they're easily impressed by whether or not you are free-to-play, right? At the risk of sounding very elitist here, that's just typical behavior of the masses who mainly rely on memes, clickbait, and drama as their sources of online interaction, especially in gacha communities. They're nowhere near as invested into gacha games as I am, and my standards for what's impressive are way higher. Again, cue the gacha rotation clip. When it comes to what you've done in gacha, what's impressive isn't whether you're free to play or a whale or something in between. Like, I don't give a about that. If you want to try and impress me for some reason, then what I care much more about is your commitment to the gachas you play. How long you've been playing them, how much work you put into your accounts, anything that suggests consistency, that you've been putting in the work to make your account better and better over time. That's what I care about, not whether or not you're a dumbass free-to-play or a dirty whale or how lucky you got rolling for a particular 5-star character. That and showcases of legitimate skill, such as that Billy solo that I mentioned earlier. And again, no, I don't count stuff like Star Rail 0 cycles because there's not much to be impressed by in Star Rail anyway. Actually, being free to play or being a whale does matter a little, but only in the sense that I would use that as context to better measure your progress, since obviously in most gachas, whales can progress much faster than free to plays can. Otherwise, nah, I don't really find playing gachas on its own to be anything impressive, free to play or not. If you think you've done something worthy of being called impressive, then I'll be the judge of that. Also, going back to the original comment where they said that being free to play gives some credibility to a player's gaming abilities, that's laughable, because again, most gacha games are piss easy. What's more difficult is keeping up with them. And even then, that's not exactly hard to do, especially if the only gacha games you play are the big four. And if you're wondering why I'm saying this even though I play so much gacha, that's because I enjoy the gacha slop. I'm autistic enough to enjoy this trash and care about it to a degree the likes of which exists nowhere else on my hemisphere of this planet. And unlike most gacha content creators, I try my best to be as transparent and honest about gacha as I can, despite what some of the other comments seem to suggest, since I can only say so much during a 20-minute edited interview. And so, having played gacha for this long, I can confidently tell you that playing gacha on its own is nothing to write home about. If you're looking for gamer street cred, or whatever you want to call it, then go play other games, man. Like the normal games, as I like to call them, like the Soulsborne series, any fighting game, an RTS, the first 2 Project Moon games, among others, but you're not gonna find any playing gacha. Like, it's fine if you enjoy them, I certainly do, right? There's nothing wrong with enjoying them, but playing them doesn't make you a god gamer all of a sudden, especially not playing them as a free-to-play. Otherwise, you'll just end up sounding like Lakari. And for the record, while I do call myself the god of gacha, I don't consider myself a god gamer. I consider those two to be 2 different titles. The next 2 comments I'll answer simultaneously because my answer for them will be the same. The first one goes, while I do watch Tuhu's content and it's insightful, it might be irresponsible to not mention the people who have legitimate addictions to these games that put them through distress and have harmed their relationships with others due to their spending, pity or not. And the second one goes, as a gacha player, my main issue with this kind of open-mindedness towards gacha games is the spending on rolls for gacha is a personal choice part, when in reality these games try every trick in the book to manipulate you, abuse the loopholes in your cognitive functions, in order to make you emotionally dependent on the gacha rolls and its results. That's far from a real personal choice. The reason why these 2 comments are similar enough for me to answer together is because they both have to do with gacha games taking advantage of players to get them to spend money in a predatory manner. Clearly, the guys who wrote these comments recently watched one of the many videos out there that rant about how dangerous gacha games are. But not that they're wrong, though. Gacha games are potentially very dangerous. It's almost no different from regular physical gambling, and I've always personally hated how goddamn expensive buying packs have always been in gacha games. So yes, I should have prefaced that better by bringing up the fact that it can definitely be a slippery slope when it comes to whaling and gacha, though in my own defense, Mr. Pseychie only interviewed me for about an hour, and there's only so much I can say in that time. And speaking of the interview, in it I said that for full transparency's sake, ever since I lost my original job that allowed me to whale like like 2 years ago at this point, I've fallen on hard times financially since then. So you could argue that, oh, gacha games are to blame for me being broke AF these days. But that's not what I would say. I mentioned earlier that when I spend money on gacha, or at least I think I mentioned it earlier, I assume that that money is gone forever. I may be going through some tough times now, but I don't blame gacha for that. The decision to spend money on gacha games in past years was my decision. Me being broke right now is my problem, and therefore it is my responsibility to figure out how the fuck I'm gonna get myself out of this mess. So I'm gonna be very brutally honest with you here. If you're the type of person who gets addicted to things very easily, or you have a problem controlling yourself, especially when it comes to spending habits, you should not be playing gacha in the first place. While it is definitely a problem how predatory gacha can be, it's not like they're gonna disappear tomorrow. Trump ain't gonna dismantle all the gacha games in the country like he and Elongated Musket are dismantling the US government right now. So while I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to, defend gacha companies out here, because I'm not, but I guess if you want to take it that way, I can't exactly stop you. Ultimately, this is still very much so a personal problem, because while the decision to spend money on gacha may be heavily influenced by these games and the marketing strategies and ploys that the companies behind these gachas themselves might use on you, the decision to stop is 100% personal. It can be very difficult for some people to stop spending for a variety of reasons, be it emotional dependence or, sunk cost fallacy or something else. I get that. I also get that maybe some people didn't know they had these quirks until they started playing gacha. It happens sometimes. I mean, you could say that about me back when I started playing gacha too. But the important part is recognizing that you have a mental problem with spending money on gacha, if you have one that is, and as soon as you do, you take steps to address it somehow, either by learning how to control your spending habits or your impulses or whatever, or seeking external help. Or hell, even just cut yourself off cold turkey by deleting your games off your devices if that's what you feel like you gotta do. That's why I said in the interview that if you are prepared to face the potential consequences of your actions in spending money on gacha, then sure, feel free to do so. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that unfortunately, a lot of people won't hear me or others say this. And even more unfortunately, some of those people will only learn this the hard way when it's too late to understand what we mean. Also, since the first comment talked about being irresponsible, allow me to flip the script on your ass and say that I think it's irresponsible as well for people to only blame gacha games and not take accountability for their own dumb shit decisions. Like, yes, gacha games might have been able to get you to spend more money on them than you wanted, sure. But if you're upset by this, then why are you still playing gacha games? And perhaps even worse, why are you still spending money on them when you know you shouldn't be? Demonizing gacha games isn't somehow magically gonna solve people's obsessive tendencies and gambling problems. Like, maybe for the terminally online who think that there's always gotta be a frickin' scapegoat for every controversial situation they come across on social media, they come to this conclusion, but I'm sorry, that's not how this works. While of course it's still very important to acknowledge that gacha games should not be so predatory, and we should still hold developers accountable to make their gacha games less and less so, in the meantime, people should also reflect on themselves and learn to control their own spending, either on their own or with the help from friends or professionals if they need it. If you have a problem with spending money on gacha and you blame gacha for your problems, then that's one thing. But if you keep blowing fat stacks on gacha while knowing you have a problem and you still blame gacha anyway, then at that point, I'm sorry, you're just a deflecting little piece of shit. And even if you're just an observer, right? Even if you yourself don't have a spending problem when it comes to gacha, but you look around and you see other people who do, you cannot pinpoint the blame on one reason and one reason only here. And if you think you can, then I'm sorry as well, you are delusional, and I would kindly suggest for you to stop playing gacha games as well, because chances are, you're not exactly doing much to improve the situation yourself here, are you? The next comment reads, if a game requires people with a gambling addiction collecting PNGs to keep it afloat, then I am okay with that game not existing at all. I'd much rather just pay money up front for a game with all the content already included. I am saying this as someone who's been playing gacha games recently. Very much so related to the last two questions with the whole, gambling addiction edge to it. Again, just to repeat myself, while gacha games do employ predatory tactics to get you to spend money on fat anime titty pixels, it's also your own damn fault for not recognizing the danger and pulling out before your addiction gets out of hand. And I mentioned the phrase in a more ideal world before, so I'll say it again. In a more ideal world, gacha games would not exist. Right? We wouldn't have to deal with companies using psychological strategies to get people to spend money that they don't have to. We wouldn't have to worry about, games that can potentially develop unhealthy addictions and dependencies in people. But we don't live in the ideal world now, do we? Like, gacha games are here to stay for better or for worse, and they ain't going anywhere anytime soon. What we as gacha players can do is play the ones we do have for now, figure out what's good and what's not, and let developers know that we're looking for improvements to the gacha model so that one day we can start eventually getting new gachas that aren't so predatory. Gachas that don't involve people getting addicted to rolling for stupid PNGs, at the very least not at a significant financial cost. So never mind the fact that the comment here seems to imply that everyone who wails on gachas apparently has a gambling addiction, which, by the way, if that's what you truly believe, then you've never seen what an actual gambling addiction looks like. For you to say that you're fine with gachas not existing, that's the kind of mentality that the internet these days is absolutely infected with. Like, forget COVID, this is the real pandemic right here. The mindset that if there's something out there that you don't like, it has to be removed from existence. For some things, sure, like the Nazis or the CCP, but gacha games? Get your ass back to League of Legends, you f***ing clown. Besides, that last line saying that there's someone who's been playing gacha games recently, I can tell that you're most likely a newer gacha player who got into it somehow. Maybe you kept hearing about these gacha games from other people online and decided to give them a try. Or maybe your friends all play the popular gachas and you wanted to know what made your friends want to play them. Whatever the case, I do appreciate you giving gacha games a try at least. At least you're better than the vast majority of people who just shit on gachas without ever actually playing one. But ultimately, this comment just lets me know that you don't really like gachas, man. Like, people talk shit about games they like, myself included, as you've heard here in this video whenever you hear me call gacha games trash. But saying that a game should stop existing? Like you're a wannabe free run talking to a demon somewhere is crazy work, man. I don't know how else to put it. And if that's really your mentality, then I suggest that you stop playing this gacha slop immediately, because they're clearly not for you. Like, games are meant to be fun. They're meant for you to have fun with. But clearly you don't sound like you are. You and your mindset playing gacha serve zero purpose, and you should remove yourself from my domain now. The next comment says, some free-to-play players pretend like it's a status symbol, says the self-proclaimed gacha god. And I'll also include one of the replies here, which reads, so again, he uses his own arguably over-wasteful investment to justify his status while dogging on others who do the same thing. While parts of these comments are things I've already sort of responded to earlier throughout the video, I bring them up anyway because I want to discuss the general vibe of most of the comments giving me shit in Pseychie's interview, which is one of two things. Either they don't fully grasp the sheer experience I have with gacha, or they just hyper-focus on the money spent because that's the easiest thing for them to latch onto. The vast majority of gacha players are casual, and that's before I take myself into account, because if I do, then I consider almost any living person on this fucking planet who's ever touched a gacha game to be casual compared to me. So there's no way your average gacha content viewer on YouTube would ever hope to understand where I'm coming from when it comes to gacha without me at least spending some time to explain a bit of what I've done. It's just that, again, there was only so much that I could say during a 20-minute interview. And again, I'm not blaming Pseychie here, but since the interview I had with them focused on the whaling aspects of Gacha, and given the whole anti-whale nature that a lot of Gacha players out there have that I've already thoroughly explained earlier, naturally, that's what people will try to use to downplay what I have to say. It's just too bad that they clearly don't have the mental capacity for much else. For the record, yes, I do in fact use the whole Gacha God moniker as a status symbol. Dare I say, I'm using it as a tagline for my content creation to separate me from the rest of the chaff, so to say. But make no fucking mistake, I earned this, compared to all the fucking retarded free-to-plays out there who sit there typing free-to-play by the way, and think that they're in any position to lecture someone like me about status symbols. And yes, I don't mind if you consider the money that I've spent on Gacha to be excessive or wasteful. Like, that statement on its own in like a vacuum I don't really have a problem with, because 100 grand is definitely a lot of money, a ton of money in fact, that could have been used on better things. I agree. But dogging on others who do the same thing? My guy, let me know who else has done the same thing. But I ain't talking about the money. I'm talking about playing Gacha for 7 going on 8 years and managing a dozen going on 13 at once. Cause while you brainless casuals let money dictate your entire mental bandwidth, I value not just the money, but also the time and the experience that I've gained from going through all this. Hell, I would argue the time and the experience is more important than the amount of money spent. For people who care a whole lot about being free to play, y'all really seem to also care a whole bunch about money that's not even yours. Oh, and when I asked you to show me who else has done the same thing, I'm spoiled the answer for you here right now. You're not going to. At least not from the western side of Gacha content creation, cause here, there is not a single other Gacha content creator quite like me in terms of all the shit I've done in Gacha. Most of you watch people like Tectone, Mtash back in when I was still making Gacha content at least, Gacha Smack, Saint Tontus, all the dog shit reaction and clickbaiters, the retarded glazers, and the insufferable drama farmers, so it's no wonder the average comment that I seen in Pseychie's interview with me reads like a comment that you'd find in a video from any one of those CCs that I just mentioned. So in case I'm not making this painfully clear yet, I call myself the god of Gacha not simply because of the money that I put into my gachas. Hell, it's not really even one of the main reasons, because if it were, then technically, along that logic, any whale who spent more than 100 grand, or at least somewhere around that amount, on Gacha would also have to be called a god of Gacha too. And clearly none of you in Pseychie's comment section would think that now, would you? I call myself this because I have played more Gacha than you, I keep up with more Gachas than you, and I know more about Gacha than you. And I have yet to see someone else out there who does the same thing. Like, given how big Gacha games have become in the last 4 to 5 years, I thought maybe I'd eventually see someone else out there who could. Honestly, Mr. Pseychie is one of the few CCs who I think could have the potential to. That's why I was more than happy to give him this interview, and that maybe his audience is a bit different from your typical lobotomized Gacha viewer crowd that you'd normally find on social media. But given the kinds of comments the interview got, I guess I was expecting a bit too much. Shouldn't have been surprised, I suppose. Also, I can't respond to each of these since the video itself is getting quite long here, but I saw quite a few comments giving me crap for ruining my life with Gacha and other bull like that. While normally I would love to spend the time to tell you everything that's gone into my decision to commit to Gacha the way that I have, now I don't really feel so inclined anymore. All I'll say is that I certainly don't think my life is ruined. I still got a roof over my head, right? I still got food to eat, and I can still play and enjoy my gachas while working on content and looking for other ways to support myself in the meantime. I mentioned earlier that I don't like to judge others because I don't know what their lives are like. Maybe there's stuff going on that I can't see, or stuff that they're not telling me. But clearly y'all lack the brain cells to do the same, so y'all can go f*** yourselves. I mean, I did call Gacha slop earlier, so it makes perfect sense that a lot of people who play them are no different. Last comment to end the video on a lighter note, professional gooner. That's it. That's the entire comment. And to this, I say, abso-fucking-lutely. I mean, just look at all the gooner shit behind me, for God's sake. Like, go look at my Twitter while you're at it, too. All these other gacha CCs out here bitching about retarded shit or glazing their favorite trash gacha. But me? I just retweet fat anime tits and ass. Forget drama. This is what social media is meant for. I'm aware that while people usually use gooner or gooning as a meme most of the time, there are times that people use it in a more negative context. The most recent example that I can give here is the whole Veressa drama in Genshin right now, with people disliking or even hating her design. Imagine hating a fucking imaginary character. Couldn't be me. Because they think it's catering to gooners or some retarded shit like that. Well, reality check for these people, gachas have always been for gooners. Gacha games sell characters. That's the whole point, or at least the main point of their gachas. So they gotta come up with ways to convince you to pull for them. And would it surprise you, right, to know that one of the best ways to sell a character is to give him some fat fucking titties or something else that people would look at and go,
"Shut up and take my money."
Granted, there are definitely some gacha games out there that are way more gooner than others, sure, but you'll still find gooners even in the more conservative gachas. Hell, Genshin is a perfect example. Like, why are people bitching about Veressa when Mona's been in the game since launch? So the comment above might have called me a gooner to try to insult me or something. I don't know. Again, I said I don't want to judge, but nah, bruh. I'm a proud gooner, man. I know what I like, and here on the internet, I ain't afraid to show it. Like, just look at all the kinds of gachas I fucking play. And if you ask me, if you play gacha and you're not a gooner, or at the very least you don't have like a character in each of your gachas that you're like a really big fan of, then why the f are you playing them? And that's it for this video. I could easily make it longer, but responding to all the dog shit takes I've seen would take too long, and I have other videos I gotta make. If you enjoyed this one though, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if listening to me put people in their places sounds like a fun time to you. If you did enjoy it because you were one of those people, leave a like anyway, because f you. Check out my socials down in the description, and if you really enjoy the content, consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.